Welcome into Nebraska Shoot-Around. Anna Bellinghausen and Drake Keeler here in person with you finally. Got some good weather-ish back in Nebraska. I guess not just a blizzard. Glad we made it in the office before some more snow hit. But Drake, let's talk some Nebraska women's basketball. Last night, a big win over Michigan at home. Looking at that score, 62-43. Was that surprising at all?
Yeah, I think so. I think Michigan they've kind of had it weird where pretty much all their games have been either they blow the other team out or they get blown out. This one obviously went in Nebraska's favor. You knew it was a game that Nebraska could win, but it was really impressive that they were able to do it by 19 points at home against another team that's pretty good in the Big Ten.
Yeah, so over this past week, 2-1 is that record in Big Ten play. Similar theme has been strong defense. What have you noticed most?
Yeah, they've played really well defensively. Even in the loss to Minnesota, I think they held them to like 62. And then, that's really impressive with a team that has as many scores as Minnesota has. Illinois, obviously, they've struggled this year, but they've bounced back from their loss to Nebraska with back-to-back 90-point games. They have talent. And obviously this game, shutting down Michigan, holding them to 11, 12, 12, 9, and like the quarter breakdowns, So that's really good to see. Jazz Shelley and the rest of the defense have been a big part of slowing down some of those top scorers like Mara Braun and Layla Filia for Michigan and Genesis Bryant over at Illinois.
Wanted to get a little bit more in depth with those wins as well. So 56-48 at home against Illinois. That's when that 2-1 record started in the week that we're talking about. So fourth quarter drought, but Alexis Markowski came up big time for the Huskers. What was important throughout that game?
Yeah, that was a tough game in a few ways. They started really well. Kind of just never built on that lead. I think it was like a 1-point game at halftime. Got it back up to double digits, and they just did not score for the first 7.5 minutes of the fourth quarter. And usually, when you do that, you're not going to expect to win. But they did, and they held on. They shut down Illinois' offense. And finally, their only field goal of that fourth quarter was Alexis Markowski getting the pass inside, get in position, and finishing at the rim. She had some struggles finishing in that game, but, they're going to go to her in those clutch moments, in those key moments, and she was still really good, made the play.
Yeah, sometimes
kind of sealed it.
Just got to find a way at some point or another, whether you're making shots or not, and obviously Alexis Markowski comes up big. And then 62-58 loss at Minnesota. That was on Sunday. So just 19 points in that first half, and then they took the lead in the third. Cal and Hank almost had some heroics late game for the Huskers, but what do you take away in that loss? In a tough environment, too, against a great Minnesota team. You touched on it.
Yeah, Minnesota's certainly not the same team as last year when they were kind of near the bottom of the conference. They look like an NCAA tournament team. I mean, they had Mara Braun not scoring well. They have a good freshman. She didn't score at all. And they still, had plenty of contributions. And obviously, you don't like that if you're Nebraska, but that's a really good team on the other end, especially on the road. So, but you still don't like the way that you lost that game. You scored 19 points in the first half. You take the lead in the third quarter, then give up a 12-0 run. Callan Hake was spectacular down the stretch. She's just made play after play, and she's done that a few times this year. But, Minnesota hits a dagger three. My battle, not a stellar three-point shooter, but knocks that one down to seal it. Credit to the Gophers there. It's one that, I'm sure the Nebraska really wanted to win, really thought they could have won. They could have won, but, they moved on, and obviously they responded.
Yeah, responded big time again, 62-54 or 43 win at home last night against Michigan. And I think it's interesting how different faces have stepped up for the Huskers, too. Kendall Moriarty being one of those names. She had a career high or season high. And then also Solidarian White get going as well.
Yeah, Kendall Moriarty, what a game. Early hits a three, kind of puts a hesitation move on the defender, drives to the rim and one, and you have not really seen that from her consistently in her Nebraska career. She made the plays tonight. Her teammates believed in her. They talk about that post-game. Coach Amy Williams has a lot of belief in her, and she was able to show that. And that's just one of the really impressive things about this team is that, the bench you might not have one of these bench players putting up 8-10 points a game, but, in these wins, one of them's going to make plays. They might make a string of plays. Jessica Petrie finished with only 2 points. Felt like she was a lot better than that. But, and that's really impressive about this team. Darian White, starting point guard, has really kind of gotten adjusted to Big Ten play, smaller guard, trying to find her shots. You look at the number, she shot 6 for 14. Maybe that's not ideal, but she was really good. Obviously, it's a slow offensive game, so she was really impressive as well.
What'd you take away most in that post-game press conference as well, and just hearing the sentiment from the team and where they feel they're at right now?
Yeah, they felt really, proud of their defensive effort, their rebounding effort. Michigan's a great offensive rebounding team. They held them off the boards, and that was really important. They were obviously happy after a big one like this, and they believe in what this team can do. Darian White talked about like all these bench players. They feel like they could be starting, and they're all capable of making those types of contributions that Kendall Moriarty made tonight, and many of them already have in wins this season. So that's a great strength of this team.
All right, looking ahead at Penn State on Sunday. A team that's 2-3 in the Big Ten, kind of in the middle of the pack in that conference, and they just, although beat a struggling Rutgers team, so having a win at their back too. So what's going to be important heading up to Happy Valley?
Yeah, definitely a team that is better than the record suggests. I think 2 of those losses might be the ranked teams. They also lost to Michigan State without their top scorer, McKenna Marisa. She's a great player. Nebraska last season they blew them out at home, but this again, it's a better Penn State team. They have another player who has a 40-point game this season, and they just welcomed back Ashley Owusu, who is a former All-American at Maryland. I think the last game she played before her transfer to Penn State, I think that was against Nebraska. I think she hurt her finger, and then she was out of the lineup, got back healthy, and then things just didn't work out here, so they didn't play her on that Final Four run. Finally gets back on the court. She was really good. I think she had like 18, 5 and 5 off the bench, and she's just a really great player. That Penn State team is dangerous. And in a road environment, that's going to be, if Nebraska can pull this off, that's another great win for them. But it's going to be a really good game, kind of like last week at Minnesota.
Yeah, I think it's almost time to start looking at that Big Ten outlook too. You can't get too ahead of yourselves in the conference rankings, of course, right now, but Nebraska is in that top tier, in that top 4. So right now it's Iowa, Indiana, Ohio State, and then Nebraska. And then it's a drop-off, I would say. So I think they're in the top tier of that Big Ten. How do you look at that in those conference ranks? How much can you take away from it?
Yeah, I think they're exactly, where you want them to be at this point. Obviously, there's a lot of season left. Pretty much they're only a game and a half ahead, but, they are a game and a half ahead this early. So that's really important because, the top 2 are obviously Iowa, Indiana, Ohio State probably makes it top 3. Those 3 are ranked. After that, it's a logjam, just 6 more really good teams. The Big Ten has gotten projections. I talked about this in my takeaways from the Michigan game, kind of just talking about the outlook. The Big Ten's gotten projections for 9 teams in the tournament, But obviously, I don't think you want to be that 8, 9 team. They got 7 in last year, a few at the 11 play-in games. You don't want to be in that group. So I think a top 5 conference finish is certainly attainable for this Nebraska team if they can keep on winning these big games like they did against Michigan. So that's really important. And if they beat Penn State, you really like how they look so far.
You don't want to be sweating it out on Selection Sunday.
Right.
What are some wins that you think Nebraska needs to be in that conversation of having a more relaxing Sunday when it comes to March Madness time?
Well, I think I think they've done it in conference play. I think they maybe didn't take advantage of the non-con schedule as much as they would have wanted to. They lost to Creighton, they lost to TCU, they lost to Kansas, and none of those by themselves are bad losses, but those are the 3 toughest non-conference games, and they were all, I guess, winnable per se. But they've really done a lot better job in conference play. They beat Michigan State on the road, beat Maryland, now beat Michigan, and I kind of looked at this stretch where they play Minnesota, Michigan, and Penn State, and I was like, they need to win one of these games, and they did that. You win 2, you're really feeling good, and obviously you just got to keep it going. Got to not have the letdowns that they kind of had last season against some of those bottom of the conference teams, and that's another part you really like when they played those Illinois, Wisconsin teams. that they didn't have their best games, but they still pulled it out. So I mean, it's really just every game. Obviously, you don't need to win every single one to make the
Whatever
tournament,
happens against Iowa happens too.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, you know,
it's a tough team to beat, but I think what Nebraska's done for the resume is pretty. I would say it's in a good spot right now, and I think it'll continue more so at Penn State. Really excited to see what this Husker team can do, especially with the new faces they've had stepping up. I mean, you still think about a player, Natalie Potts, who's just a freshman and has been tearing it up earlier in the season especially. But, Drink, anything you're looking forward to for that Penn State matchup?
I think it's going to be a great basketball game.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to see how they can kind of slow down that Penn State offense if they can, because I mean they've just got so much talent on that other side, and you want to see the offense probably play a little bit better. They haven't scored above 70 points in the last 5 games, but you know you want to see them shoot it better, obviously. But you know the defense is obviously going to be a big part again.
Well, Drake, thank you so much for hopping on and talking some Nebraska women's basketball. You can catch all the updates at Drake Keeler. That's your tag, right?
Yeah.
Twitter,
just
X,
my name,
everywhere.
Yep.
Find him. He'll get you your updates, takeaways, all that good stuff. Thanks so much for joining the Nebraska Shoot Around.